I'm Captain Catherine Janeway. This is Commander Tuvok. We're from the Federation starship Voyager.
Picard. Welcome, one and all. We are gathered together once again this week to discuss Star Trek Picard Season 3, somehow all the way up to Episode 7, this one entitled Dominion. But before I go too far, if you're new here or have otherwise forgotten, there will be tons of spoilers ahead, so please duck out now if you're not into those things. That being your last chance, on with the show. I want to address something here because normally I don't watch other reviews or any other reactions to this show before I record these because I want to go in fresh. This time I did watch a couple before doing this, and I'd like to just make a little counterpoint right up front because it seems like a lot of people are having some issues with this, feeling it's the weakest episode of the season. It was unneeded filler. While this isn't my favorite episode of the season, I wouldn't put this number one. I thought it was fantastic. It was a lot of character development, a lot of exposition that we needed. It took a pause between the pretty intense stuff that we discovered prior and the pretty intense end of the season I think we're about to be thrust into. Yes, there was a lot of stopped momentum on stories like Worf and Raffi, as well as the Riker-Troy relationship, although they were briefly mentioned here. It filled in a lot of information that we didn't necessarily have before. It gave a lot of new characterization to Vadic, something that's sorely been missing. It reintroduced the whole ongoing Jack storyline and kind of threw out some of the stuff we thought we had learned before. Let's get into the show because right after the recap, we get into this thing with a big guest star, a big spoiler, another person that I was very excited to see, and this is something I hope Star Trek can continue doing going forward. They finally took an actor, a character from the Orville, and introduced them into Star Trek, so now we are sharing characters back and forth that direction. You may remember this character from a very pivotal episode of the Orville where he was a scientist who unearthed an old school Earth time capsule. This is where we discovered the cell phone. This is where Gordon fell in love. So that's a very pivotal episode. I really hope to see this guy in more stuff because he definitely seems like he did a fairly good job playing a Vulcan, and I really think that he should get more sci-fi roles.
All kidding aside.
Okay, I know that was way overdrawn. Yes, we get the return of Captain Tuvok ? Ampersand? What's that thing I'm looking for? Asterisk? Because in a very nice scene, we get the crew working together, well, mostly the bridge crew. 7 of 9 is talking to Captain Tuvok on the view screen. They're going back and forth, having this nice conversation about how Starfleet has been compromised and she requires help. The Titan requires help. They need to take this thing down. At the same time, we have the bridge crew in the back trying to do some analysis, do voice work analysis, trying to determine if this is the real Tuvok or if he's been infiltrated and replaced with a changeling. 7 is throwing out some conversational hints about things that only the real Tuvok should know, and we get this yes moment where he proves that this is the real Tuvok, only to one moment later find out that when 7 throws another question at him, he fails this one. This now indicates, and we are specifically told by faux Tuvok here, that the changelings are keeping people alive, at least specific people alive who they're taking the place of, in order to gain more information from them. He even tells us here that the people that have been replaced and taken over, they will be longing for death. Death will be a sweet relief based on all of the stuff that they're doing to them right now. So that's good and bad. That means Tuvok, the real Tuvok, is alive, and I'm very thankful for that. But it also means he's probably not doing too well right now. And all of the other replaced characters, they're probably not doing that well either. Very happy that more and more of my character return predictions are coming true. So Vadic is torturing and trying to get information out of Riker and Troy. That is not shown on screen at all in this episode. However, it is referenced, and we get a message from who's supposedly the real Riker, and that lends our crew to believe that he is still alive. They don't know that Troy's on the Shrike. It does make me feel a little anxious because we had the cliffhanger with them last episode and it wasn't touched upon here, so I want to know what's going on there. But as I said, I do like the overall feel of what they actually did in this episode. The main thing that we discover in this episode, after they pull off their daring plot, they lure out the Shrike. They drop all of these pre-programmed force fields to cut all of the changelings off from each other and simultaneously keep them in, I guess, hermetically sealed jars or force bubbles or whatever you want to call them, so that they can't keep infiltrating the ship. And we get a captured Vadic here who is fantastic. I love this acting. It's very over the top. There's also other moments here that you seem like the character's actually going through something, and there's slower moments. There's quieter moments. I think there's a lot more going on than we're even led to believe in this episode, but here we find out the basics of the backstory of Vadic. After the Dominion War, or possibly during the Dominion War, 9 changelings were captured, put in Daystrom, experimented upon, and they were in essence attempting to turn these beings into the ultimate spies so that they could change their matrices, make them better shapeshifters, permanent shapeshifters, abilities to take on the complete form in order to go on to some planet, disrupt it, cause havoc. That was a plan of probably Section 31 doing this experimentation, housed within Daystrom. And this is a very interesting point because it was kind of just glossed over, but that means Vadic and her cohorts, her other original 8 friends, 9 total, were capable of getting access to all sorts of things within Daystrom. Is that the case? Did they gain some of their weaponry from Daystrom in the first place? And if that's truly what happened, why did they need to go back and break in? Was that all just subterfuge? Was that all a grand plot, a trick? Was it not actually what they intended to do? Was it just trying to lure people into a trap? Because they could have taken a lot of stuff from Daystrom while they were already there. Perhaps they took a lot more from Daystrom than we even know, because if they were able to replicate people working in Daystrom, specifically Vadic, possibly that wasn't the name, but I'm going to say Dr. Vadic, the one experimenting on the Vadic we have now, was killed and replaced by this Vadic. So does that mean all of these Section 31 people were just changelings, and now they could be out there with all of these things? The stuff they left behind might just be stuff they don't need. Who knows if the stuff they left behind truly actually is what it is? It could be replaced with fakes for all we know. Maybe they already have Kirk's body. Maybe they already have the Genesis device, and those are just cheap props. We also get to find out more and more about Jack Crusher here. As we kind of assumed, the Irumodic syndrome isn't necessarily what's causing his hallucinations. There's a hell of a lot more going on here, and we also get some dialogue from Data Lore before Alton Soong Lal that Section 31 did further analysis, further study into the Irumodic syndrome in Picard, and they don't necessarily believe that was a correct diagnosis. They think that something else might be going on and that it wasn't actually the disease we thought it was. That being the case, if it wasn't Irumodic syndrome within Picard, then it's probably not Irumodic syndrome within Jack, but what is it? Is this a culmination of what Q told us all those years ago, that Picard is potentially evolving into the next step of humanity? Is it possible that Jack inherited this? One thing Vadic tells us later in the episode is that Jack never belonged to Beverly. Let's take a quick step back here. The human form changelings here are able to impart this fancy new ability onto other changelings if they link with each other. However, it comes with a downside. It comes with a shortened half-life, and potentially they have to live with searing pain for the rest of their shortened lives. Is it possible, at the point in time when this experimentation was going on, that Jack was created as some sort of changeling infiltration? So if you look at the timelines here, DS9 ended in 2375. Nemesis began in 2379. We're currently in 2401 in Picard Season 3 here. Now, we don't know how long these changelings were being studied, being tampered with, being experimented on. Assuming they escaped before or around the time that Nemesis took place, that could mean they were able to implement a plan back then. And their plan could have been to put a changeling embryo or something along those lines into Beverly Crusher, mixed with the matrices that they currently have that allows them to perfectly copy an organic life form. So if they actually implanted this thing with Picard's DNA, it would evolve to the point of having potentially the same genetic issues as Picard. So did they inadvertently put this person in Beverly to grow up and eventually replace and infiltrate Starfleet, but because of the combination of Picard's genes, it evolved into something more, something greater, and is that why they're currently after Jack? I'm choosing to believe this evolution of humanity is similar to the whole Gary Mitchell situation way back in the second pilot of TOS, when they encountered the Great Barrier and he started developing telepathic, telekinetic powers. His eyes changed color, not red, a little white, but he was unable to cope with this because of his limited scope, and he went a little crazy with power. Is Jack potentially better equipped to deal with this, and he'll actually be that first step forward? Because as we see in this episode, episode, he has both telepathic and telekinetic abilities because he reads Sydney's mind. He also controls Sydney's body, similar to controlling a mech, I guess. He takes control of her and he does moves on the other side of the force field, and she mirrors those moves. We also find out that Data and Lore are partitioned in the brain of the new golem. They're being kept separate because they are afraid if they let them mix, one personality might overcome the other, and they obviously think that's going to be Lore. If that's the case, he will overwrite Data. By doing so, they throw around the idea of maybe we should just delete Lore. Well, of course, Lore overhears that, and I believe that leads to the fact later on when Lore takes over the Titan, lowers all the force fields, and this allows almost all of our characters to be taken out, and for Vadic and the rest of the crew, the Changeling crew, to take over the Titan A. Did they get to Data Lore a long time ago while they were in Daystrom, and the whole point, this whole ongoing storyline, was to get him on board the Titan in order for him to provide easy access for these changelings to infiltrate the ship? Or is it just Lore being Lore, and it just kind of happened to work out that these two evil sides meshed up and came together at the worst possible time? There were a lot of other things going on, talking about philosophy, talking about the moral issues, and I do like that. Again, it's been a while since we really had that in Star Trek. Whether or not they'll choose the correct side, I have to imagine they will. And also throughout this episode, Vadic kept humming Three Blind Mice. This turns out to be a song that the evil scientist that was experimenting on her used to hum all the time. But I wonder if it's going to have more meaning, because apparently the song Three Blind Mice is supposedly about the Oxford Martyrs, 3 Anglican bishops who refused to renounce their Protestant beliefs, and they were executed for following their Protestant learnings rather than the Catholic ones. And this seems like it might be a nice, metaphor for the whole fact that these changelings are radicalized and they are not necessarily following the beliefs of the original changelings. I could be reading more into this than was intended. Another point of coolness here, when Vadic does her shape-shifting towards the end of the episode, where she's shifting between a couple people, each time she shifts, some smoke comes out. Is that supposed to lead us to believe that there's more to her than the other changelings? Or is it just a nice touch because she's always smoking, and when she smokes, she kind of stores some of that inside of herself, so when she morphs around there, some of that's escaping? I don't know why. I just thought that was a fantastic little touch, and I really, really enjoyed that. One of my favorite scenes was that touching scene where Geordi finally gets to talk to Data, although Lore is kind of in the driver's seat at this point, because that is one thing we never got. These were the 2 best friends. These are the ones that needed closure, so to have Geordi actually get that moment talking to Data, even if it's going to be the only time they have that conversation this show, I feel like that was something that we've been waiting for a long, long time. So overall, at the end of this episode, the ship is taken over, the changelings are in command, Shaw is down and beaten up again. This guy cannot catch a break. I really hope he does not die, because I really want all of these main characters to live so that we can see a spin-off show with them. But he's really getting the short end of the stick. I'm wondering if he comes out of this on the other side with all of these new experiences, with a renewed sense of what Starfleet captaincy actually means. If he dies, I hope he dies in a fantastic, heroic way, but I really hope he doesn't, because I want years of Shaw captaining his own ship going forward in the new Star Trek timeline. Overall, I really liked this episode. I thought it was great. Obviously, there was a couple minor issues here or there, but it really forwarded the character development and the plot, even though it didn't necessarily forward the overall story. I know that sounds a little weird, but that's just how I look at it. What did you think of it? Did you feel the same way as the other people, thinking that this was kind of a waste? Or did you really like it? Are you liking the show overall? Leave all your thoughts below. I've got a lot of them. I've talked for way too long. Do the like, do the share, do the bell, do the subscribe, do everything. But until next time...
It appears that in my haste to report to the bridge, I neglected to put on my uniform.